We all know the life stages. We're children, and then we go through an unbalanced teenage stage, and after that, we're grown-ups or adults. As grown-ups, many of us inevitably start dating, fall in love, and plan on spending our lives in a relationship. It's easy for us to separate our childhood from our adult love lives. After all, what do our childhood memories and youthful experiences got to do with our adult relationships? They're a long time in the past. In fact, experiences and patterns in our childhood can be causing much harm or conflict in our relationship. We're tremendously affected by our childhood in ways we don't even realize. The more we are able to be aware of these impacts, the more we will understand how to use them to our advantage, instead of hurting in our relationships. Humans still have a few evolving to do when it comes to self-awareness. We're wired to be driven by our emotions, however, our feelings regularly get in the way of our rational thinking. As a result, we're slow to memorize and name our own feelings, let alone identify where they're coming from. This lack of self-awareness in the present avoids us from understanding our childhood's impact on our feelings or behaviors. As a child, we develop patterns to handle our confusing emotions. In fact, our childhoods affect our love life in extreme ways. To understand how our childhood is affecting our love life, we first have to identify what patterns and standards came from our childhood. People learn by watching and imitating others. Naturally, at that point, what we observe in our families growing up essentially shapes us. Here are 8 things about how our childhood affects our love life that we need to know. 1. Our beliefs and values. We are significantly affected by the adults who raised us when it comes to our beliefs and values. In fact, many of us can quickly name a repeating value that our parents or guardians taught us growing up. Even as we develop and create our own values, we carry these childhood beliefs with us into our adult relationships. For example, Sally's parents instilled in her a profound emphasis on self-discipline. Not as it were does self-discipline define her life, but she saw it as a standard by which to determine others, as well. Hence, when her boyfriend wasn't always the foremost self-disciplined, she judged him for it. It took numerous discussions for her to realize that self-discipline was not the most critical value, but rather, something that she was raised to accept was more important than others. It's difficult to break away from the beliefs and values of our childhood. When it comes to relationships, you would like to be aware that other individuals might have different values. 2. Our communication patterns. Each family communicates in a different way. In some families, the conflict is managed within low voices and calm gestures. In others, conflict might include a part of yelling and hollering at each other. Or, in a particularly dysfunctional choice, conflict isn't recognized at all. We all develop our own unique communication styles, but that doesn't mean we aren't essentially affected by our family's patterns. These differences in communication will unavoidably come out in our relationships. Let's say Mike's family tended to holler at each other when they disagreed with each other. After their loud discussion, everybody would move on and get along fine. But Mike's partner, Cindy, comes from a family in which hollering was seen as unloving action. All of a sudden, when Mike gets angry and shouts, Cindy considers it the worst thing he seems to do. In the meantime, Mike is just trying to express himself. This difference results in a communication breakdown. The sooner we'll be able to identify our communication patterns, the sooner we'll acknowledge them to our partner. At that point, together, we'll establish communication standards for our own relationships. 3. Our attachment styles. According to psychologists, there are 4 attachment styles that adults adopt: secure, comfortable with closeness, intimacy, not stressed about rejection, autonomous. Anxious, preoccupied, very insecure around the relationship, need closeness. Avoidant, uncomfortable with closeness or intimacy, values freedom and independence. Anxious avoidant, uncomfortable with intimacy and worried about a partner's commitment and love. It's not difficult to see how our attachment styles can influence our romantic relationships. What could be more difficult to see is how our childhood formed our attachment styles. In fact, our attachment procedures are established within the attachments we had as children. Some of us were blessed to grow up with secure attachment. In other words, we had parents that were involved, caring, and expressive of their love. This implies we'll be way better arranged to be open and trusting in our adult relationships. Not surprisingly, if we grew up with unpredictable, careless, or untrustworthy parents, we are likely to feel insecure about our adult attachments. 4. Our signs of affection. If we were blessed to grow up around loving relationships, we went through numerous hours watching how those relationships worked. In specific, we have noticed how the couple showed signs of affection. We inevitably embraced these signs of warmth as ordinary. At that point, we brought them into our adult relationships without questioning them. There are many different ways to show love. For a few individuals, an act of love could be to be excessively supportive, helpful and generous, always inquiring, "What can I get you?" But for others, it could be the total inverse. Love might appear through self-sufficiency so as not to be a burden. As a result, partners might not feel affection since they are showing it in different ways. The sooner you'll be able to get on the same page, the better. 5. Our coping mechanisms. Have you ever listened to the phrase, "Let your inner child play"? We all have inner children who may or may not need to play. In any case, our inner children certainly come out with the coping mechanisms we formed in childhood. These coping mechanisms at that point repeat themselves in our adult relationships. For example, when growing up, Kelly adopted a perfectionist mindset to get affirmation and approval. Without indeed realizing it, she slipped into a pattern of control to battle off any negative feelings she faced. Whenever she fought with her boyfriend during their first year of dating, she rapidly slipped back into a critical state of a need for control. It took her a lot of work to recognize when her little girl reaction was coming out. Once she did, in any case, she could recognize the coping instruments that might have served her prior in life no longer did. 6. Our mindset on money. In our childhood, we develop a mindset on money based on the quality of life we have or yearn to have. Beyond the requirement for nourishment and shelter, there really is no universal standard for how to spend your money. A few individuals have no issue dropping hundreds of dollars on clothes, whereas other individuals wear the same sweater for 10 years but fly to a new city each month. Others might put each spare cent of their paycheck toward retirement. These varying opinions will come up in our relationships. Particularly as two individuals start to merge their lives, they will have to question their mindset about money. While you don't ought to agree on everything, you'll discover an adjustment. 7. Our outlook on family. Of all the differences in values and behaviors, one specific value deserves its own category: how much importance you place on family. During childhood, we all develop views on family, love, and what we deserved. Now and then, we made these decisions consciously, but more regularly than not, they are formed without our awareness. Do you see a relationship as a team? Does family require particular roles? How much priority do you put on the family? It's critical that we first know what we need and want from a relationship. Once we've got this level of self-awareness, we'll be able to be open about what we and our partners need. It can be frightening, but with this viewpoint over all else, we wish to be on the same page. 8. Our behavioral patterns. Behavioral patterns might appear like a catch-all, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be mentioned. Each family works very differently with their schedules, traditions, and regular behaviors. We grow up considering what we do as the norm. As we make our way into adulthood, we proceed with many of these norms. They may be as simple as what time you eat supper, or as loaded as power dynamics in a family. For example, Mandy's fiancé comes from a family of nappers. 2-hour naps are a normal portion of their routine, particularly on busy days. But Mandy's parents, on the other hand, are a few hours away from being insomniacs. These differences certainly come out in their daily lives. At times, they've had to give up their different behavioral patterns. At other times, they make room for each other's patterns. When two individuals come together with different norms, they need to work to establish a new normal. This process is getting to take some tolerance and time. Knowing those 8 things about how our childhood affects our love life is step 1. To truly benefit from it, we need to consider our own childhood and how it is affecting our love life. To do so, we ought to ask ourselves these questions: what patterns of the family are we repeating? What example did our family set, and what do we want to take from it? What adapting procedures did we develop in childhood? How do our family dynamics and traditions compare to our partners? We can also follow these general principles as we try to untangle our childhood and positively influence our love lives, decide what we liked and didn't like from our childhood, be open to other models for family and relationships, decide what we want our love life to look like, set goals and communicate them effectively with our partner, forgive ourselves for past mistakes and future ones. So in conclusion, we often think of our childhood as the distant past. However, our childhood affects our love life in many ways. The more we are aware of these effects, the better we can communicate our needs to our partners. At the end of the day, we all want to create a love life that keeps us smiling and happy. Please like and share if you like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to see our latest videos. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.